I do not want to be remembered as the guy who found most of the pieces of the plane. I'm on a remote sandbank and I've just found the second piece of debris from the greatest aviation mystery in history. MH370 was a high speed crash.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our audience from around the globe. I'm your host, Sid, and welcome back to Sit Down with Sid podcast, where we bring people together one conversation at a time. A quick note before we begin. MH370 remains a complex mystery with many conflicting theories. The views expressed by our guests are their own. Our goal as a channel is to provide a platform for various perspectives as we continue to piece together the story. Joining us today is a man who needs very little introduction, Blaine Gibson. Blaine is a world explorer who turned a life of adventure into a singular mission. While governments searched the deep ocean, Blaine was on the ground recovering more physical evidence of this aircraft than any other individual on the planet. Blaine, we have previously hosted Grace Nathan on the series, and it was your bond with families like hers that fueled your decade-long quest. As of today, February the 3rd, we are in the final weeks of the Ocean Infinity 2026 search, which is set to conclude March 7th, and your perspective is more critical than ever. It is a privilege to have you here at this high-stakes moment. Welcome to the show, Blaine.
Well, thank you, Sid, and it's a privilege to be here.
Of course, no problem. Thank you for accepting our invite, and it's great to have you. Okay, Blaine, so why don't we get right into it? You were a lawyer and a world explorer long before MH370. How did investigating things like the Tunguska meteorite prepare you for the specific hunt for a missing aircraft?
Well, I did three major mysteries I tried to solve before this one. One was traveling to Tunguska to find out what the meteorite was or whatever caused that tremendous explosion. The other was searching for the lost Ark of the Covenant, and the other one was and exploring the Maya in Guatemala and Belize, and I participated in some archaeological expeditions that were trying to figure out what happened to the Maya. And what I just learned was to start out objectively, not to start out with some theory and try to prove it, but approach it open-mindedly, what happened, and start to look for evidence and let the evidence lead me to the conclusion. The theory needs to fit the evidence. It's the evidence that comes first. So, for example, with the Maya, the elites were very advanced scientifically, and yet suddenly the civilization collapsed. And they didn't just get on a spaceship and fly back to their home galaxy. The whole Maya city-state system dissolved because what we found out was that the common folk overthrew the priests. They got tired of serving the priests in the jungle. They overthrew them and they moved to the coast to become sea traders and make money. And we found an old fortress that was the last refuge of the Mayan nobility. We found caves with bashed in skulls that were clearly from nobility because they had the obsidian teeth inlay. And we found on the coast, subsequent to that, post-classic, there were house mounds with artifacts from all up and down the coast of Yucatan, and they were engaged in sea trading, but they also practiced their religion. So when we saw that, we realized that the Maya had not gotten on a spaceship and gone home. They'd simply had a social revolution and gone to the coast to make money. And similar to 2012, a lot of people said, oh, the Mayan calendar ends on 2012, and that means the world ends. They're predicting the end of the world. No, we found that stele that had the Mayan time calendar on it, the Baktuns, and the reason it stopped in the equivalent to 2012 was simply that they ran out of space on the rock. There were a whole other thousands of years of the time calendar on a wall at nearby ruins in Copan. The Mayan calendar did not end. That was a good movie, but it was a fantasy. So we did learn what happened to the Maya. I did not find the Ark of the Covenant, and I did not find the Tunguska meteorite because whatever that was clearly blew up in the air. I can just say that nothing prepared me for the extreme hostility that I've encountered in the search for Malaysia 370. The people who have their pet theories and agendas, who do anything to defend them, ignore evidence, attack me because I am finding evidence. That I didn't encounter in those others. And there was nothing in those others that could prepare me for it.
Okay. I know I had mentioned that we had the honor of having Grace Nathan on the show. And you have mentioned it before that hearing her speak at the first time during the first anniversary in Kuala Lumpur changed your life. What was it, or what was that light bulb moment about that encounter that turned a personal curiosity into over a decade-long mission as of today?
Well, just for the background, when I first learned what happened to Malaysia 370, that it disappeared, I was selling the family home in Carmel and going through boxes of childhood memories and following it on television. So there was always a special close attachment I had to Malaysia 370 because of that. So I joined some discussion groups, but wasn't really actively involved. But then I went to the 1 year anniversary in Kuala Lumpur. And I sat there and I listened to a young woman named Grace, whom I did not know, speak about her mother and losing her mother on the plane. And that reminded me of my mother. And I just thought, my God, I could have been on the plane. How would my mother have felt? My mother could have been on the plane. How would I have felt? And it really touched me and really inspired me. And when I learned that there was no organized search of beaches and shorelines at all, they were spending thousands of dollars searching underwater, but no organized search of beaches and shorelines. I realized now that is something I can do, because I really believed that the first piece of 370 debris would be found by someone who was just walking on the beach. And it was. It was found by Johnny Begg, a beach cleaner in La Réunion later. And so I just set out myself to look for debris in different places. And I was very open-minded. I looked, because I was living in Southeast Asia at the time, I looked in the coast of the Gulf of Thailand and the Andaman Sea, and I went to the Maldives and talked to the witnesses and looked for debris there. And I didn't find any or any trace of any, and no reports of any that were credible. And so then when the flaperon was found, I knew that the plane was in the Southern Indian Ocean, as Inmarsat had said. I went to Mauritius and Rodriguez and looked and didn't find any. I went to La Réunion and met with Johnny Begg because I wanted to learn when the flaperon washed ashore. That was very important for the drift analysis. And then I went to Australia and looked for debris in Australia and didn't find any, but I did meet Professor Patiarachi of University of Western Australia, who told me that if I looked for debris about 2 years after the crash in Madagascar and Mozambique, I might find something. And I also met David Griffin of CSIRO, who said, look at Madagascar. So I went to Mozambique first because it was a country I had not been to. I want to go to every country in the world. And then I found my first piece of debris. But I had been looking for a long time and found nothing. And it really was great who inspired me because I realized that if I could solve this mystery, it would make a real difference to people's lives right now, not just things from the past, but a real modern tragedy that could help people by solving this mystery. So I was doing my little part.
That's amazing. Since you brought up Mozambique, my next question is, take us back to that beach in 2016. What went through your mind the moment you saw that no step stencil in the sand?
As we approached that sandbank, and I'd been told to go outside the reef where things wash ashore, and local fishermen told me that sandbank was a good place where they went to collect nets. As we approached it, the flamingos flew away, and I got there, and I was with the boatman and another man and the owner, the captain, and there were three of us. And we walked around for a while, and then suddenly Junior Vali, who was the boat owner, was holding a gray triangle and said, "Blaine, is this from the plane?" And I walked over and I held it in my hands and I could see that it had no step written on it. And as I had to see later than I expected, I knew that it was from the plane. I knew in my heart that it was from the plane. And there were three of us there. There was Bento, there was Captain Rod and Junior Vali and me. So that's four total. And they had brought me to the sandbank saying that we've got to land and get off very fast because there's a very narrow period when you can land there and get back off. You can't land at high tide, and you've got to get back before the tide gets so low that you can't get off. So we didn't have very long. But my heart was racing, and I did not feel happiness. You don't feel happiness when you're holding something that is from a plane, from a crash in which 239 people died. Happy would be if we had arrived on that sandbank and there were 239 people there sipping on coconuts, grilling seafood, saying, "Hey, what took you so long?" That would be happy. But what I did feel was a sense of accomplishment. I had found something that I was looking for, and an enormous sense of responsibility because here I am in a country I don't know that is torn by civil war. I'm on a remote sandbank, and I've just found the second piece of debris from the greatest aviation mystery in history. I have to make sure that I get this piece to the proper authorities and ensure that it is investigated. And I also felt this apprehension in here because there were a lot of wild things being said about Malaysia 370, and I was in a country that did have a civil war going on, and I wanted to be sure that I got this safely into the hands of authorities. And so we took the boat back, and I made arrangements, and then I flew it myself to Maputo, Mozambique, to hand over to the proper authorities. And the head of civil aviation there was a very good man, and I knew it was in good hands when I gave it to him.
Interesting. I know. Would you be okay if I can share the photo of the debris that you have collected over the years? Because my next three questions are revolving around that. So if I have your permission, may I share the photos of the debris, Blaine?
Oh, yes, of course. Please share any photos you wish.
Okay, so what I am going to do is I just want to share this with our audience. Okay, here we go. So let me just, okay. So if you don't mind taking us through this one by one. So if you don't mind telling us a little bit about where is that or what is that part? We have altogether a collage of 11 photos. So I will take you through each one of them. Okay.
That is a fractured piece of the floor panel. It is one of the latest debris to be incorporated in the Annex 13 report. It was found not by me, it was found by people in southern Madagascar and handed it to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I and the 370 families, we handed this to Minister Loke ourselves. This is additional proof that the main cabin tragically shattered on impact. And as you can see, there's a little white thing there. It's a part number that matched
Mm-hmm.
to items used to build the floor on Malaysia 370.
Okay. Now let's talk about this one.
That is Ling Lauder with the fairing. That is actually the second piece found, but the third piece reported, because I found no step in Mozambique on
Mm-hmm.
February 27 of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
I took it very public because I wanted people to be aware that debris could wash ashore and get the word out. And sure enough, Liam Lauder said, "Oh, well, I found this piece in Sai, Mozambique in late December of 2015. And everybody said it was crazy that it was from a boat or something, but I didn't think so. And so I took it back and kept it in my garage, and I had no idea what it was from. But then when he saw me in the media, he reported it, and it's a very significant piece. It's the ferry.
Okay.
This is Niels Kruger with Roy. This is a very significant piece of debris because he found it after he saw me and Liam Lauder in Wilderness, South Africa. It's the westernmost piece of debris recovered, the farthest one from the crash site. He
Mm-hmm.
found it in March of 2016, but when that got in the press, a dentist recognized it and said, "Well, I took a picture of this on the same beach, but it had all sorts of barnacles all over it and stunk." And he had the date of the photograph, which was at the end of December of 2015. And so Roy is one of the most significant pieces of debris for the drift analysis.
Hmm.
And we call it Roy because it's the has the Rolls-Royce emblem from the engine cowling. It's from
Mm-hmm.
the cowling of the engine. And it's so significant for debris because we know exactly when it arrived because of the photograph with the barnacles. And that helped move the crash site further north. In order for the debris to get there at that time, it had to be from further north, like north of 36 or more likely north of 33.
Got it. I guess this is the one that you were talking about with the barnacles.
Yes, this shows the photograph taken by Dr. Jean-Luc with the barnacles, then on the same beach taken by Niels Kruger when he found it. And that also showed us that when debris first made the long voyage from the
Mm-hmm.
crash site, it had barnacles on it. But then once the barnacles had had a chance to be baked in the sun, blasted by sand, buried in sand, eaten by predators, the barnacles are all gone. So the same piece of debris would have no barnacles after it had been in the area for a while.
Got it.
This is the first piece I found in Madagascar. It is a part of the right wing panel that is near the flaperon and the wing flap. And it's significant for the breakup of the right wing. And interestingly enough, it has embedded in it the shank of a fastener from an adjacent panel. So when the wing broke apart, whether it was in the air or upon impact with the water, it was a high-speed impact, and this panel impacted an adjacent panel and was actually embedded with a fastener. So it's an important piece of debris.
Right.
This is the nose landing gear door on Sirica, Madagascar. A local man found it and brought it to me. And it's very significant because it is part of the landing gear door. And I really think it should have been analyzed more thoroughly to determine how the plane broke apart. But in any case, a very significant piece of debris from Sirica, Madagascar. Quite heavy, but it floats.
Okay.
This is me just after we found the monitor case, and that's another piece. It's a wing component, and that is at what I call 370 Cove on Riake Beach in Madagascar. And the monitor case is very significant, and I think I sent you another picture of the monitor case. It is the case around the TV screen on the back of the seat in front of you in economy class. So it is something that everybody looks at. They look at the TV screen that case surrounds. And it was very significant because a lot of people were claiming that the fuselage was intact underwater after a controlled intact ditching. No, this piece of debris, the monitor case, tragically demonstrated that the main cabin shattered on impact with the ocean.
Got it.
And there's a closer up of the monitor case, and it literally brought tears to my eyes when I held it. Nobody could hold that and not have that feeling, because it may very well be something someone leaned up against. It may be the last thing that someone saw. And it had the fabric from the seat in it, and it also had the coat hook pin. This is me and Johnny Begg, where he found the flaperon. I went to La Réunion about a month after the flaperon was found. My purpose was to look for 370 debris. I did not find any there. However, he showed me where he found it, and very important, there had been rumors that the flaperon had arrived earlier and people had seen it. Those rumors were wrong. I checked around, and Johnny Begg described how he saw it. It was in the process of walking ashore. It had not been there the night before, but then the morning of July 29, when his cleaning went back to the beach to clean, they saw this item washing ashore. And he had the presence of mind to recognize that this was part of an aircraft and needed to be immediately reported to the gendarmes. He did. And the world and the families, everyone owes him a great debt of gratitude for having that presence of mind to recognize what he had and report it. And that is me with O-Step on the Paluma sandbank in Mozambique. I didn't just want to call it debris. I wanted to give it a name, and it already had a name, No-Step on it. When I first held it and looked at it, I thought it was probably from the wing, but it turned out to be from the tail, part of the horizontal stabilizer on the tail. that shattered either in the air coming down or more likely shattered upon impact with the water. It shows that this was not a ditching. When there's a ditching, the tail remains relatively intact. This and another piece found in Mozambique of the tail show that the tail shattered on impact and that this was not a controlled ditching.
Got it.
And that's me and the landing gear door on Onsirika Beach, Madagascar, with the man who found it. And just so you understand, Riake Beach is on Ile Sainte Marie, another island just offshore. This is only about 8 miles away, but this is a peninsula on the main island of Madagascar. So the two beaches are very close, but you have to take a boat to go between the two.
Got it. I think that's it. So perfect. Now let me just go back. Okay. Thank you for explaining all of this. I think it was important for our audience to see, all of this. And okay. So critics often ask why your finds were not covered in barnacles like the reunion flaperon. Can you explain the sandblasting effect and why the lack of marine life does not discredit the wreckage?
Sure. When I first found No Step, because I'd seen the flaperon, when I first found No Step, I asked the fishermen and the boatmen, why doesn't it have any barnacles on it? And they just said, oh, well, if it's been in the sun and been in the sand, the barnacles fall off. So most of the debris that we find here does not have barnacles on it unless it just washed ashore. So this was a boatman with a grade school education telling me that. And meanwhile, PhDs were pronouncing that it didn't have any barnacles on it and not aviation. Well, I'll take real life experience over a bunch of degrees hanging on the wall any day. This man knew better than the so-called expert. And sure enough, ATSB analyzed that and other debris. They looked for traces of marine life. They found lots of traces of barnacles and other marine life, proving that it had been in the ocean and floated there. And they just said that because the sand will blast it, it gets buried in the sand, the barnacles die, it's sitting in the sun, they dry out, the sun is very powerful, bleaches everything, dries them out, they fall off, they're eaten by predators, crabs, birds, whatever. That's why most of the debris does not have barnacles on it. And when you walk on the beach, I look at the huge amount of plastic that washes ashore there, because none of this stuff is local. It's all washed in from the open Indian Ocean. Most of the debris does not have barnacles on it unless it just recently made the journey and washed ashore. Of the pieces I found, only one had barnacles on it, and that was the mother case, and it only had 3 of them that had attached. The rest didn't have barnacles on it, but did have traces of them.
Interesting. Now we saw the pictures of the debris, and some of the pieces that you found in Madagascar appeared scorched. Do you believe there was a fire in the avionics bay, and how does that challenge the popular pilot suicide narrative?
I do not believe that there was a prolonged fire on Malaysia 370. It is possible that there was some sort of a flash, but definitely not a prolonged fire, because the plane would have gone down within 10 or 30 minutes. Regarding those pieces I found, of the 36 pieces that I have found and people have brought me. For one thing, I have only found about 6 myself, and others were brought to me by local people. Of the 33 pieces of debris in the Annex 13 report, I found and collected 18 of them, and 15 were found by people in 5 different countries, people who were totally unrelated to me. Now, of those 33 pieces in the Annex 13 report, only 2 appeared to be burned. There are additional 27 pieces that have been found and recovered since the Annex 13 report, since Annex 13 disbanded, and those have never been officially investigated but identified by experts. But in all of the 60 pieces, only 2 appeared burned. And of the 2 you refer to that were in the Annex 13 report, they were investigated by ATSB, and they concluded that the burning on one piece had occurred after it washed ashore, that someone had either burned it or maybe just checked it with a cigarette lighter or something to see what it would do. And that's quite possible because before the debris reached my hands, it had been 6 months among local people. So who knows what happens. Then the second piece that appeared burnt, they said they didn't think was burnt, but there needed to be some more analysis to see if it had been exposed to heat. They passed it on to Malaysia for further investigation. Malaysia did not do a further investigation of the report. So no prolonged fire. None of the other debris showed any evidence of fire or burning, and it would. However, that does not preclude the theory that there was an oxygen bottle explosion or other incident in the avionics bay that was the cause of 370's demise. Again, it could have just been a sort of a flash, not a prolonged fire, like on the Qantas flight, where an oxygen bottle exploded, and they managed to save the plane through the brilliant actions of the pilot.
Got it.
So that theory is possible. The issue of a fire is very sensitive among family members because nobody wants to think of a loved one having died in a fire. Well, I can say it's very clear that there was not prolonged fire on Malaysia 370 that directly caused the deaths of anyone. If there was any sort of explosion or fire on 370, it was a quick flash that extinguished and did not directly affect the people.
Got it. Now, while we were looking at the debris, you had mentioned it seems like a high impact crash. The reason I bring this up is because we have also hosted Jeff Weiss, who explores the data spoofing hijacking theory, and Jean-Luc, who argues for a pilot-controlled ditching. Having handled the wreckage yourself, how do you reconcile your physical finds, especially the high crash impact, with their theoretical models?
For one thing, it's up to the people who have the theories to reconcile their theories with the debris, with the evidence. I don't have a theory. I have just been finding and reporting evidence, and it's up to other people to come up with the theories if they want to. I don't have one. It's been very clear to me from all the debris that I have found and handled, and the other debris that others have found in 6 different countries, more than 20 people completely unrelated to me, that MH370 was a high-speed crash, that it was not a ditching. And the reason for the R1, the speed, Boeing and Annex 13 investigated the damage done to the flaperon, and most importantly, the Tanzania wing flap, the most important piece of debris found. And that damage could only have occurred if they were together and in a retracted position at time of separation. So the flaperon, they said, was in the neutral position because that would be the equivalent of retracted, right next to the wing flap. And the wing flap, very significantly, was in the retracted position when it separated from the rest of the plane, not deployed as would be during a ditching. So that, at a certain point, you need to rely on the experts who actually physically investigated it. To me, that overcomes a theory. Now, the other debris, in all, 25 pieces of shattered debris from the main cabin have been recovered, 15 of them in the Annex 13 report. The monitor case shows that not only did the fuselage shatter, but the main cabin shattered, and even a seat in the main cabin shattered on impact. So there's no question in my mind that it was a high-speed crash. I have the utmost respect for Jean-Luc Marchand and Patrick Blaine. They adopted a theory that said that it explained why the plane was not found near the seventh arc. They said it was piloted to the end, and then there was a dive, which was recorded by Inmarsat data. Then there was a recovery, and then a glide, and then an attempted ditching. That's a legitimate theory to explore. They explored it, and their area was searched, and the plane was not found. So I'm sure that they will revise some of their assumptions and calculations and come up with another area where the plane may be, either not based on those assumptions or based on those assumptions and something else. That's up to them. I can only say that regarding 370, it was not a controlled intact ditching. It was not a controlled ditching, and I do not believe it was even attempted ditching. And there's another thing that's very significant about the glide. Now, if the plane was glided before it dove and before it crashed, the debris would say nothing about that. However, if the plane dove and then was piloted and recovered and then glided and then ditched or crashed, the debris would have a lot to say about it. It's not just Blaine and Marchand who adopted that theory. Also, Richard Godfrey is espousing it now, but he says that the whisper data shows that. Well, without getting into whether whisper can track Malaysia 370 or not, we don't even need to get into that. Let's get into the simple question of, was there a piloted dive, recovery, glide, and ditching? Well, many experts who've looked at the 11 parts recovered from the right wing, and there was a very recent one called No Step 2, which I got out of Madagascar and revealed, that's very significant and adds to that. Those support the possibility that the plane, during the spiral dive, the right wing broke up in the air. There are many experts who believe that. ATSB did not conclude that, but they were careful to say at time of separation. The separation of the pieces on the right wing could be from the in the air during the dive or upon impact with the water. Now, if it was in the air during the dive, to just put it into layman's terms, you can't recover from a dive without a wing, and you can't glide without a wing, and you can't even attempt to ditch without a wing. So if there was a pilot at the end, then the debris would say that this dive, recovery, glide, ditching did not occur. Probably didn't occur at all, and definitely did not occur if the wing had broken up in the air.
Got it. I mean, listen, you've been very critical of the investigators who cherry pick data and also what you say and so forth regarding the debris and the wreckage you have found. How do you maintain an evidence-first approach when the MH370 community is so divided by all this wild speculation?
It is very divided in the community, and I don't have a theory, and I've tried not to have a theory. Just like to say this, that three possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Third-party hijacking, pilot murder-suicide, and a series of accidents, and a ghost flight. Those are all possible, of varying degrees. I just look at those and make sure that they are supported by evidence. Now, I spoke with many people who were involved in the investigation of Malaysia 370. And there were three I spoke with from the Annex 13 team, off the record, who had different opinions of what happened. One believed there was an oxygen bottle explosion in the avionics bay, and then that's what caused the original turnback. And then a hypoxic pilot, whether it was the captain or someone else at the controls, turned it the wrong way, or maybe wanted to land at Penang but was hypoxic and turned northwest up the Straits of Malacca, and then made another hypoxic turn trying to get back maybe to Kuala Lumpur. And then it became a ghost flight and flew on and crashed. That's what one of them thought. The other one thought that it was the captain, and that there were just maybe some things in the captain's life that we didn't know about. And another one, who had flown with Captain Shaw many times and knew him very well, believed that it was a third-party hijacking. She said that the time that the transponder went off and the final sign-off to from Kuala Lumpur was a perfect time for someone to intrude the cockpit. That's when the door might open for one of the pilots to take a break, and that there would be confusion at that time as they were finishing meal service. So she thought it was a third-party hijacking. Those are three knowledgeable investigators, objective, and they had three different conclusions. So I just looked at those and am objective, and as long as a theory is supported by evidence, I surely am willing to entertain it and give it a lot of respect. So basically, ultimately, we need to find the plane to know. And when we do, I think we will know which of those happened. We need to find the main crash site and the wreckage, and we may learn some other things. I think that when we do find it, if we do, I think there will be some surprises that none of the experts thought of.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because I wanted to talk about the Ocean Infinity search. which started December 31st of last year. And we are just over a month away from the March 7th deadline. Does the silence from the search so far make you question the seventh arc, or do you think is the terrain simply that difficult?
Well, there are two types of silence with the Ocean Infinity search. The first one is that Ocean Infinity is very private and does not announce what its plans are or where it's going to search. And I fully support that decision. They're a private company. It is their risk, their money, their equipment. And the 370 community, in quotes, is so toxic, so hostile. There is so much rivalry. The media has been so prone to conspiracy theories and hostility that Ocean Infinity just doesn't say. Because if they do, then you're going to have your different experts saying, oh, they got to search my area first. They got to search my area first, blah, blah, blah. And so Ocean Infinity remains silent, and I respect that. They do make some statements through the 370 families, and I think that is very good. They are dedicated to solving this for the families, and that's very appropriate. So that type of silence I fully support. A lot of people out there criticize them for it and track the ship and try to guess what they're doing. I don't engage in that. The other type of silence is that there's been no announcement that the plane has been found. Well, that's because the plane has not been found. If Ocean Infinity had found the plane, they would know fairly soon, not immediately, but within a few days, they'd have a pretty good idea. And then they could check some things out and be sure. That may take a few more days or a week or so. And then they would inform the Malaysian government and they would inform the families, probably at the same time. And then we would know. So the reason they're silenced is that they didn't find it. They've searched the Blele Marchand area. They've searched the IG area and to the east of the IG area, and they have not found the plane, and that's why we haven't heard anything. There are still some areas in their original basic proposal that have not yet searched and covered. And I, for one, am hoping that they'll go just a little farther north because the simulation that guided me in my successful search for 370 floating debris was from University of Western Australia. The specific simulation point was at Broken Ridge, 32.5 degrees south, 96.5 degrees east. That's where I think the plane most likely is. However, the UWA area, which accurately predicted timing and arrival of debris, is large and extends from 28.3 degrees south all the way down to 32.5 degrees south. So I think that those locations, new locations, no reason to go over a place that's already been searched. The plane wasn't there. New locations need to be searched wider from the seventh arc until the plane is found. And it's just up to Ocean Infinity how long they're willing to go and how much expense they're willing to endure. That's up to them. It's their money.
Okay, so let's take this fast forward, March 8th, 2026. The 55-day no find, no fee Ocean Infinity search has concluded. If they come up empty by that time, what is the next step? Based on your drift analysis, is the search looking in the right place, but perhaps with the wrong assumptions about the crash, or maybe they should explore the two new areas that you just mentioned in this previous question?
Well, I really only understand marine oceanography, so I base my search and belief on where the plane is on oceanography. And I believe that it is somewhere in the UWA area. between 28.3 and 33.2 degrees south, or 28.3 and 33.2 degrees south, or in the CSIRO area, which would extend that down to 36.5 degrees south. Now, some of that area has been searched and not all. If it's not found by Ocean Infinity, they're not going to be able to cover that whole area, new locations thoroughly. Then I would hope that other companies interested would do more targeted searches within that area. I'm a wreck hunter, not a rocket scientist, so I don't make a judgment on the flight calculations of the Inmarsat data. However, I would hope that experts will continue to work to narrow those down. But I believe that from the debris and the other evidence that the plane is somewhere in the UWA or CSIRO area in the southeastern Indian Ocean. And I just hope that Ocean Infinity finds it, and if they don't, someone else will.
Well, everyone is hopeful. A couple of more questions before we wrap this up.
Sure.
Now, if whether the plane is found or not, you have dedicated over a decade to this. What do you want your role in this mystery to be remembered?
I do not want to be remembered as the guy who found most of the pieces of the plane. I want to be remembered as the guy who found and collected from local people some pieces of the plane that gave some guidance to search companies to find the rest of the plane, and gave an inspiration to keep on searching until we do find the main wreckage and the truth. I don't want this to be about me and the floating debris that I have found and collected from local people. I've found about 6 pieces myself, or people with me at the time. And most of the pieces I've collected from local people after my appeals and the appeals of the 370 families to hand in debris. Right now, those pieces loom large because they are the only debris that has been found for the plane. And I remind you that more than 20 pieces have been found in 6 different countries by people who are totally unrelated to me. And those are the more important pieces, like the flaperon and the wing flap and the left outboard flap. So I don't want this to be about me and the floating debris. That is just a small piece of a very large puzzle. Everything that I have done will be in vain if we don't continue the search and find the rest of the plane. And as far as what happened, by whom, how, and why, I remain open, and I would call on people to just find the plane and then place the blame, not before.
Great. So now, Blaine, you have spent your own money, faced personal attacks, faced the hostility, and even risked your safety for over a decade on this MH370 mystery. If the search ends this year and nothing is found, can you, or let me rephrase this, will you ever be able to truly walk away from this?
I am not obsessed by this. It's been said by some that I am. I am not. I am determined. This is a cause. This is something that is very important to me, but I have another life. I do other things. I pursue my goal of going to every country in the world and climbing mountains and so on. So I have another life. However, would I be able to walk away from this? No, I'll never stop caring. I'll never walk away. I believe that finding additional pieces of floating debris are not going to add much to the equation now. They did in the beginning, but not now. I continue to be available to help and answer questions of anyone who needs guidance, who is interested in searching the plane. I am in contact with Ocean Infinity and with other companies that are interested in searching for MH370. And some may be willing to do it without a contract. Some will want a contract. That's up to them. But I would hope that if Ocean Infinity does not find the plane, one, they may want to come back and give another go. But I don't know if Malaysia would do another contract or not. That's up to them. But I would hope that there would be specifically targeted searches by other companies to find the plane. And so, no, I don't walk away from it. I don't give up, but I'm not totally absorbed by it. I do have another life.
Great. Well, Blaine, this was a great conversation. I'm so glad we were able to have you here. We want to thank you very much for your relentless dedication, the risk you have taken, and for joining us to share the story of the search that never stopped. You have stood on the front lines for the families for over a decade, and for that, we are all grateful. To our audience, if this conversation moved you, please share this episode. By spreading the word, you ensure that this story and the 239 lives it represents is never forgotten. Our collective attention is what keeps the search for answers alive. As we count down to the March 7th deadline, the world is waiting to see if the seabed finally yields what the shoreline first hinted at years ago. Blaine Gibson, thank you so much for being with us today.
And thank you very much, Sid, for your caring and objective coverage to make sure that 370 is known and never forgotten, and that all different views are heard.
Thank you so much, Blaine. And once again, we are grateful for you to accept our invite, and we will be watching the news carefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.